Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey Seahawks fans, welcome into another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. Welcome into the show, Keith.
Yeah, fun show today. We were talking about something which I feel often that I'm the only person who cares much about, and that is the offensive line. And it should be an improved offensive line this year. So a lot of newcomers, and it'll be worth talking about, thinking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I thought we'd start with the offensive guards today. We're in a full series of shows as it relates to position groups on the Seahawks. Now that we've got the 90-man roster, we kind of know what we're dealing with as we head into training camp at the end of July. So we're taking our time going through each group, talking about all the players that are currently on the 90-man roster. Let's start with guards. We're going to take a look at guards and centers today in today's show. Talk to me about the guards on the roster and how you're feeling overall about them, and we can talk about individual players.
Well, I mean, I want to see Damian Lewis bounce back. He's had some injuries and hasn't been as good as he was earlier. But I still think he's a good player, and there's a lot to like there. He just needs to, just work at the same, kind of level that he was earlier in his career before the injuries, and I think he can do that. Phil Haynes is there. He's good when he plays, but he's not healthy very often. And then there's some young guys, and that's about it. I mean, it's one of those things where there's just not a lot of depth there. I mean, I like the young guys, but overall, it's not a big group of kids.
I really like Damian Lewis. I mean, he started out at right guard. He's been playing the last 2 years at left guard. Last year of his contract this year, 6'2", 227, third round pick. Played 1,000 snaps last year, had 4 penalties, 3 sacks, 19 total pressures. His pass blocking grade at Pro Football Focus was 72.6, run blocking 66.7. The best lineman on the team that's not a tackle, and you can probably make an argument that he's the best lineman on the team at this point. We'll see what happens this year. I was a little disappointed when I dug a little deeper in Phil Haynes. Last year he split some time there at right guard, bigger guy, 4th round pick. He had 485 total snaps last year, had 4 penalties and 4 sacks allowed with 18 total pressures in about half the volume that Damian Lewis had, 60.2% or pass block grade, 58.1 on the run block grade. I was a little disappointed there. I know you don't put a lot of stock in the Pro Football Focus thing, but I was only using that as kind of a baseline to measure kind of where these guys were as our interior guys that we're depending on as far as being a veteran presence there. And so I was, and then when we talk about centers and we look at Evan Brown, I've got the same sort of issue. He's kind of the same grade as Phil Haynes, and I was a little surprised. I thought he came in a little bit more prepared. He was going to be, really fighting for this spot and so forth. And I'm just not so sure if that's really what the Seahawks got in Evan Brown, and expecting him to come in and start right away. I think that he's, at least on paper anyway, looks to be more of a seasoned veteran backup guy. And I'm really interested in what your take is on those guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Phil Haynes, like I said, the reason why he played was because he was better than Gabe Jackson, even though Jackson had the contract, had the starting experience, was the best lineman the year before. But Jackson really struggled last year, and they found that they were better off getting Haynes in there and letting him do some stuff. But the problem was that the more Haynes played, the lower his quality of play was. And so, like, he's able to play really well in short spurts, and that's they're expecting him to be the starter. Well, now you're going to see him all season, and I am worried about that. I hope that it's one of those things that when he does get in and he becomes a starter and he gets starter reps, both in practice and um, in the games, that his play will even out more and he'll be better than he looked last year. Of course, I don't know. I'm not really banking on that because I don't necessarily believe that he's going to get that many opportunities because the rookie fourth round pick Anthony Bradford, who's 6'5", 345, just a massive, massive human being, out of LSU. I fully expect Bradford to come in and um, send Phil Haynes to the bench and turn him into a backup. So, I mean
Yeah,
that's my expectation. Well, then we'll see what happens in camp. So,
I'm in agreement with you, Keith. I mean, really looking at these guys, I realize that Anthony Bradford's a fourth round pick. Phil Haynes was as well. They have similar body types as far as their size, 6'4", 330 in that range, both of them. But Anthony Bradford seems to be a little bit more athletic, even for the size. Like
mhm.
Bradford's all about that power, and but he's got more agility, I think, than he's given credit for. He scored a 9.56 on the RAS score out of a possible 10. That ranked 58th out of a 1,309 offensive guards between 1987 and 2023. So he's in the upper, like, 99th percentile as far as
Mhm.
athleticism for the position, and at 6'4", 300 and north of 30
Well,
pounds. This guy's
on the
a
Seahawks
monster,
roster lists him at 345.
which is crazy because he's 332 at the combine.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
Like I said, that's what they've got him at is
Yeah.
345.
Wow.
I mean, he's 5 years younger than Haynes. He's significantly cheaper. Um, the team wants Bradford to come in and win that job.
I agree. I agree.
Um, so the other player that needs to be mentioned as we talk about guards here is Jake Curran, um, the tackle. Right tackle played a bunch of snaps 2 years ago at right tackle, and then they went and drafted Abe Lucas, so he lost his job. Was the backup right tackle, but did get a few snaps at right guard in one game, a lot of practice time at right guard, spent a bunch of time there in, training camp. Um, just never really got, other than the one game, didn't get a lot of play at right guard, but he's built as a guard. I mean, he's a bigger guy. He doesn't have the quickest feet, but he's really powerful grinder. He's a little tall for guard at 6'6", but honestly, no one is going to care that much. Um, and he's a powerful, run blocker whose weaknesses is in pass blocking. And as a tackle, that's a concern because you have no one to your outside and you've got to be able to get out there. As a guard, it's less of a big deal because you're in a smaller space. And so he's a guy that will he I mean he's a guy that's there, and I'm sure the team will look at him as a guard, like a backup guard, because he's also a backup tackle. And if he can back up 3 spots on the offensive line between the 2 guards and right tackle, that just makes it easier for them to have him suit up and possibly get a chance to get on the field if someone gets hurt.
I agree. You and I have been in agreement on this player for like 3 years now,
Hmm.
and it's kind of weird that way. But I agree with you. I think Jake Curhan could come in and take that job. The team just doesn't seem to feel that way, at least full time anyway. And we'll see
Hmm.
what happens there. But I agree with you. He's got the athletic attributes to kind of take that spot, and for whatever reason, they want him at tackle, and I don't blame him. He's a good tackle prospect. You mentioned the slow feet and the protection issues, but maybe he's a different player now that he's been in the system for a while. We'll have to see what he looks like in camp. Another player they've got at the position at guard is an undrafted rookie free agent, Kendall Randolph, 6'4", 300 pounds, out of Alabama. Played at tackle, guard, tight end, special teams in 53 career games. Wasn't necessarily a starter, but kind of a swing tackle for them, and filled in at different times as a essentially a third tackle in their offense, lining up at tight end, which I think maybe was attractive to Seattle. They've had
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit of that in a long period of time. But he played in all 13 games last year. Started 3 games, including 2 at left guard and 1 at tight end. And so I think that it's an interesting guy. It's probably a practice squad level guy. I don't think we need to spend too much time on it.
Yeah,
The other
I would
the
agree.
other guy I think that we should mention possibly in this group is Evan Brown. Now, I know that they talked about him coming in possibly at the center spot, but last year he took 768 snaps. 700 of them were at right guard, 68 were at center. He is a guy that can play both positions. Now, I was a little less impressed than I thought I would be when I went out and took a look at the stats at Pro Football Focus. He's got a 45.5 pass block grade, which is poor, and then a 69.5 run block grade. And he's listed at 6'3", 320. So I, for some reason, I was thinking in my brain that he was under 310 pounds. He's listed at 320. He had 6 penalties, 2 sacks, 4 hits, and 22 total pressures allowed on 456 pass snaps at right guard. So not terribly impressive. And we'll see when he shows up what they really liked about him, why they gave him a contract, and when it comes to the competition, at least between the positions, he's probably got a better chance at center, but he can play. At least he can play 3 spots.
Well, and that's part of it, is that he can play 3 spots. He's the contract they gave him is that of a backup center. He's not being paid. He's not a high price starter. He's being looked at as a replacement / minor upgrade over Austin Blythe. Um, and athletically, yeah, he played all the snaps at guard. But he's athletically not. He's not really a guard prospect, even though that's where he was needed last year. He has the physical build of a center. He's a little smaller, more undersized, um, more quick than powerful when it comes to blocking. Kind of what Austin Blythe was. He'll be overwhelmed at times when asked to block Aaron Donald one-on-one, but that is every single center in the NFL. So hopefully they won't have to do that. But I think that, yeah, he's a little underwhelming when you look at his guard stats, but as a center, he'll be asked to do different things. And they're not expecting him to come in and be a Pro Bowler. He's a guy that's there. He's a hedge in case they didn't get someone in the draft, and they ended up getting someone, but was way down in the 5th round. So now there's a competition. Can he play guard? Yes. I think he's great as a backup guard, but I wouldn't want him starting. But I think as a center, he's a better prospect. And so having him come in, he's going to have to win the job now because there's going to be a competition. But if he does win that job, you can have some confidence that he's going to be decent in the middle. He won't be great. Austin Blythe wasn't great.
Interesting. I like that take, actually. I mean, that makes a
So.
lot of sense that he's more physically, has the more physical attributes of a center, and maybe struggled a little bit at right guard. He's played center in the past. I think the year prior he had more center snaps, and maybe that was the film that the team was drawing from when they evaluated the prospect. And we'll see when he comes in. He's as we transition to the center position now, obviously we're talking about Olu Oluwatimi, the 5th round prospect we drafted out of Michigan, the 6'2.5", 309 pound, 32 3/4 inch arm player. Won the Remington Award as the nation's top center, and Outland Trophy Award as the top offensive or defensive lineman in the country in his 14 starts there. It was also part of the unit that won the Joe Moore Award as the best offensive line in college football in consecutive years. So you got to like him for his intelligence and experience and competitiveness. And you worry about him a little bit with his power and his ability to, get to the second level and so forth. But I like him a lot. I like his mentality. I like that the team really loves him. They wanted him. They expected to be able to draft him, and did draft him. So I'm excited. Actually, I think he and Bradford take these jobs. It's that's my expectation. I know that might be a little high or whatever, misplaced, but by the end of training camp, I expect these two rookies to be starting on this offensive line.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think both of them project to be better than the veterans that they need to overtake. Does it happen week 1? I don't know, but I think by week 8, both of them are playing. I would say Bradford has the better shot to take over week 1, but honestly, the awards that you mentioned for Oluwatimi are there for a reason. This is a guy that was in charge of the best offensive line in college football for multiple years.
Yeah.
He knows the mental aspect of what he has to do in terms of line calls and blocking adjustments and the things that have to be done pre-snap. He's kind of a master of, and that's why the Seahawks liked Austin Blythe, even though physically he got dominated at times. He did that other stuff really well. And they drafted Oluwatimi because he knows that same stuff. He's going to be able to come in, and yeah, there'll be differences because it's a new offense and higher level, and the defenses are more complex. But it's not going to be too much for him.
But he's cerebral enough to be to react and
Yeah.
to get his hands in the right spot and have that contact balance and hold up, against the bull rushes and twists and stunts and all that kind of stuff. I just think that I just really like him as a prospect. You go watch him and stuff. He's just very smooth. He's in command. He everything you read about him as far as being in the 3 stops that he didn't go to college all 4 years at Michigan, but everywhere he went, he was looked upon as a leader. Started right away, right away. He came into Michigan his last year there of eligibility, and by the end of spring camp, he was their captain. And so that doesn't just happen to a guy that just shows up, and so I'm really excited about the opportunity for this offense to have continuity at the on the offensive line, Keith. I mean, it's been a long time, but if they re-sign Lewis, this team could be in under contract for like the next 3 years, with all the starters, and
Yeah.
that's crazy.
I mean, yeah, because they drafted both tackles last year. They got 2 interior guys this year, and then there's Lewis, who's still a young guy at 25. That's a young offensive line. It's a very talented offensive line. It's an offensive line that's capable of being extremely good. We haven't had an offensive line that we can feel this good about since 2013.
Yeah, interesting. There's one more player on the list, and that's Joey Hunt. As far as a player that's on the roster, 6'2", 299, 6th round pick of the Seattle Seahawks in 2016, was on the team for a few years there, moved around a little bit. He's got 790 total snaps in his entire career, 0 snaps in the last 3 seasons. Joey Hunt. Everyone remembers Joey Hunt as being just kind of an undersized draft pick, and somebody that I don't even know why they drafted him, to be completely honest. And I'm not exactly sure why they invited him back. I mean, other than, he kind of finished the season last year on the roster, at least on the practice squad, and then they brought him back on a futures contract. And I don't know that he doesn't have a spot. He's kind of an injury hedge.
He is a little bit, but at the same time, they've had Kyle Fuller in that spot for the last couple of years. as the backup center and, possible backup guard, like kind of a swing interior lineman. And we knew he was awful from what we'd seen. So um, Hunt is a undersized guy who doesn't have a lot of, he's not going to grind, and push people back. He doesn't have that power, that kind of stuff, but he's smart. He's cerebral. The team really liked him as a center because he played smart. He was a smart player. I think
Yeah, he
him
is.
being here is for that. Like they basically brought him in because it was at the time it was Evan Brown and him, and so that gave them backup and starter, and both of them are known for being kind of smart guys. And now he's here. He's an injury hedge and he's a tutor for Oluwatimi, because if he can take what he knows and the cerebral side of being a center and all of that stuff, and just to help Oluwatimi, like I mean, Oluwatimi is going to pick it up really quick because he knows a lot of it, but it's just the new stuff. Hunt's going to be able to uh, just help Oluwatimi get at that even faster. And so I really think that that's kind of why he's here at this point, is that if somebody gets hurt, we know we got a backup. Um, but he's here to help and he's here to coach.
So how excited are you that this management with John Schneider has expended so much draft capital in the last 2 drafts now on the offensive line, and we could have end up with 4 starters out of these last 2 drafts?
That's unheard of. 4 starters and 2 drafts on the O line. Typically, you try and get one a year because you don't want multiple rookies playing because of the mistakes and whatnot. But it worked out well for Seattle last year. It's probably going to happen again this year, and we'll see how it goes as far as how well it works out. But the fact that they've been willing to um, invest so far, they've invested a first, a third, a fourth, and a fifth in guys that we believe are going to be starters. Um, that's a lot of draft capital that they have not been willing to do much of in the Pete Carroll era, except for there's some really awful picks that they let Tom Cable make. And, the James Carpenters and that group. Um, Overall, like these have been good picks.
Do
These have
you
been
do
good
you
players that they picked, not wasting, not reaching because they absolutely have to get a guy, but really good players that have a lot of potential. Um, and it's nice to have. It's nice. It's like, wow, suddenly this offensive line is young and talented.
so there's a coach on this team that started as a running game coordinator, came over from the Rams,
Yep.
transitioned after Mike Solari left to offensive line coach last year. Is it just a coincidence that he was the offensive line coach when we had 2 tackles drafted, and now again having 2 interior offensive linemen drafted and 4 young starters on this offensive line? Did he have any impact and input on who they drafted?
Yeah, I think that was part of him coming over because when they brought over Shane Waldron, bringing in Dickerson to be quote unquote the running game coordinator for the next year, partly because Solari was under contract and they wanted some continuity, but also they wanted to give him a chance to let this work. And, now he's the offensive line coach and running game coordinator. But he was brought in. Shane Waldron wanted Andy Dickerson. He was like, "This is what we need in order to make this work." So he's in there, he's there, and they're like, "Okay, now if we're gonna bring this guy in, give him some authority, that kind of stuff. We're also gonna draft him some guys, um, and let him develop them." And look what he did with the tackles last year. That was great. Now he's got a couple interior guys do the same thing, um, and I don't think that it's coincidental that the offensive line has become a priority with the new offensive coaching staff. And I don't think it was a coincidence that the offensive line was not a priority under, in the Tom Cable years, because he thought he could turn defensive linemen into offensive linemen, because he did it once. He thought he could
And
do it
Russell
every
Wilson's
year.
playing style dictated that they might be able to spend less
Yeah,
and do
that's
more
part
in
of
the
it too.
quarterback position. Yeah.
But now they're investing in it. And just last year, in the first year of this new philosophy of investing in the line, you already saw major dividends. Now we got another year where they've invested in the line, and it should be a significant improvement again. And then the continuity of letting those four guys play together all year this year and then into next year, we're going to start to notice just how good this line can be, because of, of that investment, the quality, the time, and the coaching. It's going to matter. It really will.
The Seahawks have always been accused of not investing in their offensive line, but when you take a look at the investments, whether that be free agents or in the draft, we've actually done pretty decent as far as expenditures, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, the players, they didn't work out, but the expenditures were there. What makes this different now?
What makes this different is they're investing in guys that are good players. um, James
It sounds so
Carpenter.
simple.
James Carpenter, when he was drafted by Cable, was a head scratcher. It was like, oh my God, why did we do this? You drafted a guy way too early, and everyone knew his life was soon to be a guard. But you drafted him at a tackle spot,
Yeah.
and they tried to play him at tackle, and
Jermaine
it didn't
Ifedi,
work.
same.
What?
Jermaine Ifedi, same.
Jermaine Ifedi was, oh God, Jermaine Ifedi was just that was an awful pick.
Yeah. Talk about a team drafting at the back of the first round, Keith, that needs to press in order to fill a position of need. That's what that was.
Yeah, and they took a terrible player, just a guy
Who
that
should have been a guard and was
who should have
drafted
been a
as a
guard.
tackle and then
Yeah,
forced to play tackle and then ended up being a guard and
yeah, with the
a poor
Bears,
one at that because he just couldn't.
he wasn't
He
good.
developed too late, and then now he's he's out there now as a free agent.
Mhm. Yeah, nobody wants him because he's shown that he can't block as a tackle, he can't block as a guard. He's a big,
And he's a
huge,
penalty machine.
and he's been a penalty machine his entire career. I mean, there was there was no reason to draft him. I mean, I get, okay, they needed a tackle because they didn't have a right tackle. They needed one. But he was a guy that if you went and looked at his tape and you watched how awful his feet were, he
You never
was.
liked that guy. You never
I
liked
never
the
did.
prospect at all. That
I
just
didn't like him as a
crazy.
prospect. I honestly was like, he's a guy that everyone was talking about. Yeah, he's this big, powerful. I'm like, no, you don't want him. You don't want him. I remember on draft day in the morning, someone, this is, when we were on Twitter, and someone was like, okay, um, what one player would you be most excited about for the Seattle to get that's probably going to be available? And my response was anyone but a Fetty. And it's still there. I mean, it's still up there, but and I would have been excited if someone had saved Seattle from themselves and drafted a Fetty before, because it was just such a bad pick. And again, this was Tom Cable saying, "This is what I want. This is the type of guy I want." He was involved in evaluation of offensive linemen because he was like, "There's a certain kind of guy that I need to run my system and all of that." And so he was involved in that, and it was just one bad pick after another. When he was part of that process, when they finally fired him, the offensive line started to get better, even with less investment. And Mike Solari came in and had to do a lot with very little, and basically he had um, to deal with a lot of Tom Cable's failures, and he had to try and make it work. It was not a good spot for Solari. He did all right. Um,
Since the team traded with New Orleans, um, our offensive center away, Pro Bowl offensive center. Now I know that he was injured and all that kind of stuff, but
mhm.
we've really been struggling to fill that position now. Since then, Justin Brett was originally guard. They moved him to center just as a last
Actually,
ditch effort to see he could even play.
he was originally a tackle, and he was awful. They moved him to guard. He was worse. Then they moved him to center, and he were like, "Oh, hey, well, this actually kind of worked a little bit."
That's funny, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. And this year we've got a free agent in Evan Brown and drafted a potentially uh, starting center that's a starting center for the next 8 years.
Hmm.
How does that make you feel?
Oh, it feels great. Like, I mean, this is the. I keep saying this, and this was my one like major issue with the draft is I'm like, you win in the trenches. It may not be sexy picks, but you got to have an offensive line. You got to have a defensive line. And it wasn't until the fourth round that they got the first offensive lineman, and the
Yeah.
fifth round when they got
So
the
talk to me
center.
about that a little bit. You were
And
very impatient early in the process and settled in later to appreciate the draft. But talk to me about the players that we passed on to get the players that we ended up taking.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of players that were passed on. You know, right at the top of the draft, Witherspoon is a great player. They need defensive linemen, and one of the at least physically one of the best prospects in a generation was sitting there, and they didn't take him. Now, a lot of off-field baggage. I don't really blame them for it. And Witherspoon's a great player, so I'm still there. But then when you get down to the 20th pick, there were defensive linemen, there were offensive linemen, there were guys that they could have taken. They didn't, like the Mozzie Smiths and the Brian Breese's, and
Michael
then
Schmitz on
yeah,
offense.
and then Tippmann, the center, in the second round, um, Oliva as a guy that might have been able to get picked in, and there's just these other guys that were there, and it's like, okay, there's a lot of talent here, there's a lot of value here, and the Seahawks kept going in other directions, cornerback, wide
And then
receiver.
they passed in the third round completely.
Hmm. And so that part was frustrating because where's the defensive line help that they need? They still need. Um, and they passed on guys, and there were some, like, I like Oluwatimi, but there's a reason why he was available in the fifth round despite all the awards. Um, Tippmann is a much more sure thing. That's why he was a second round pick. Um, and they missed out on
Yeah.
that because they chose to go in another direction. I'm not saying they went in the wrong direction. I'm just saying, like, there was a level
We'll
of
find out.
frustration because
Yeah.
winning in the trenches is, I mean, that's where you win and lose games. And if they're not going to invest in the trenches, they're going to struggle. And they have shown that. I mean, the proof was last year. They invested in the offensive line for the first time in forever, and great things happened with the offense because the tackles were good. Um, so where was that investment again this year? It's like, go back to that. Well, you need to. Your defensive line is trash for the most part, and they didn't. So that part was frustrating, but it was never a thing where I didn't like the individual guys. I mean, Witherspoon's a fantastic prospect. Njigma's a fantastic prospect. It's not that I don't like those; those are great players, but it's, God, this team needed help
Mhm.
on the lines, at the line of scrimmage. They needed those guys.
Well, I'm glad they finally came
So
around. They grabbed Cameron Young. They got Hall. They grabbed Morris. I think that and Bradford and Oluwatimi. I think that they ended up getting guys at the value spots in the
yeah,
draft.
but they're
We'll
lesser
see how it turns
prospects.
out, though. We'll see how it turns out. It's kind of crazy, but the draft is an interesting bugger because
It
you
is.
could be in love with guys like Schmitz and Tippmann, and they may end up getting hurt or injured or not be in the right spot, and not play well or whatever. And then guys like Oluwatimi, value drafted in the fifth round, ended up having a long career. He might not be a Pro Bowl level, but he sure is steady. and holds the fort down with your offensive line. Very cerebral, smart. To me, it's hard because you're still right in it. But I think as we look back in 3 or 4 years, this may end up being, a blessing in disguise, and we could very well have come out of this draft with just exactly the right players. It's just it's unknown at this point. It really is.
Yeah, but it's also possible that they missed out on Creed Humphrey in order to draft
Well, that
Dwayne Eskridge,
I
right?
understand Dwayne Eskridge is having a hell of a camp in
Great.
2 practices.
In those 2 practices where every time he runs a route, everyone holds their breath that he's not going to get hurt again.
He
But yeah,
looks
I mean,
explosive on paper.
yeah. But that,
so we'll see.
but but it does illustrate kind of what I'm saying, right? It's like, okay, yeah, we can get a guy later, but if that means you pass on Creed Humphrey, was it worth it?
Yeah,
Now,
you just don't know, and unless you had a crystal ball at the time of the picks. Obviously, I think Creed Humphrey was probably a little bit more of a had the ability to tell that he was going to be a special player, but Eskridge looked like he might have been a special player as well as in an impact role, and just never
yeah.
happened. But
Except for
yeah,
he's
it'll be interesting.
tiny. And the same thing can be said about the Seahawks picks. Like, yeah, they could have gotten a pass rusher later, but they didn't. They chose not to pass on Hall, and draft him in the second round, right? So it's like, sure, at least at pass rusher, they decided not to pass on the special player, in order to get some and be okay getting someone later. Even if they did that at center, you know what I mean? So it's like you can't have it both ways, because if you take Tippmann, you have a better situation at center with a guy that's much more of a sure thing.
You take a look at their situation though on their board, and
Yeah,
you got to take it for their take them at their word.
yeah.
That these are the players that they had at the time, and were the best players on their board, and that's where they went.
Yeah, no, and I'm not criticizing, and I'm actually saying that they did the right thing, because, like I said, if you go, oh, we've got to get a center, and you take Tippmann and you pass on Hall, and Hall turns out to be, a tremendous Pro Bowl level player, you're like, okay, well, you got your center, but he was on the top of your board. Why didn't you take him? You know what I mean? So it goes both ways, right? I can complain, oh, they should have drafted Tippmann, but that means they lose out on Hall. And I don't know which of those 2 has the better career. Nobody does. Not a single person. And
True.
in my head, I want to invest in the trenches. I think that is how you build a championship roster. So I would have taken Tippmann, but that doesn't make the Seahawks wrong. They evaluated Hall and said he's a fantastic first round pick, like, a guy that can be an elite player, and so he was their guy. And so, yeah, I mean, we don't know. And I'm trying to make sure to say that I'm not meaning to be like super negative about Seattle or their draft. It's because it does happen in both directions. If you're going to take a better center, you're going to get a lesser defensive end.
Yeah, and I think as long as you're taking best player available or best player on your board, I think you're improving your roster over time, the best that you can do. So we'll see how it all plays out, really, for sure. If these guys come in and start Oluwatimi, Bradford, it doesn't matter where they were drafted.
Yeah, it doesn't at all.
You got your starting offensive line for the next not dozen years, but half a dozen years, which is a great thing. Okay, so let's wrap this conversation up for today. We've done interior offensive linemen. Next show is going to be the tackles, which will be also a fun show. We had such success last year. There's really not too much to talk about other than the starting 2, but we'll find a way. And yeah, fun show. It's your favorite time of the year, Keith, talking about offensive line, the nuts and
I know.
bolts, where they were drafted, what can we expect.
I only get to do this like when we do this couple of shows, and then the couple when we do the offensive line pre-draft like profiles and stuff. This is like those are my favorite shows in the year. Which I know is sad. And if anyone's still listening, you're going to be like, oh my God, stop talking about guards. Who cares? I care. So there.
There you go. All right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWChawk, the show's Seahawks Playbook podcast. Find it on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Share it with your friends and family, all that good stuff. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWChawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.